All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me fine? Throw something in the chat if you can. Excellent, great. Thank you all. Okay, so want to talk about preparing for your LSAT. I know many of you, I'm seeing some of the names that I recognize and familiar with that are getting ready to take your LSAT. Some of you probably have just taken your LSAT. So we really want to kind of delve down into that and talk about that today. So introducing myself, my name is Justin Harris. For you all who have never met me before, I am primarily a career advisor at AU, an AU Central Career Center, working with students in the School of Public Affairs. But in another aspect of my role at AU is I also work with a colleague, Michelle Engert, who's also here, and we manage the pre-law program. So I'm a pre-law advisor as well as provide resources and try to, in a sense, have this pre-law program where we are making sure students that are interested in law school have the resources, the tools, and the information to be effective candidates applying and hopefully getting into law schools. So this webinar is part of a series that we've already done. We've already had two different sessions thus far, one talking about personal statements and the other one that was focused more on about how to apply to law school. And we partnered with the Washington College of Law admissions office to discuss some of those kind of questions and things that people typically kind of ask, and maybe some things that they don't know. We also will have one more program this fall semester talking about financing your legal education before, and then actually talking about while you're in law school, how are you paying it for and affording law school. So again, this session is going to be focused on more so preparing for the LSAT. And I did specifically have this image up behind kind of this main introduction screen where it's showing kind of a brick wall. So I know for some of you all, it can be like that. It's like, well, I'm facing this test. I've heard it's challenging. I don't know where to start, where to go, how to pursue it, how to do it strategically. So in this kind of session, it's kind of the things that I want to go over. Now, I'm not give you a disclaimer. I am not a test prep professional, so I really can't provide specific answers about, really questions that are on the test and strategy-wise about answering those questions. That's kind of outside of the scope of the work that I do. And I specifically don't recommend specific courses to people. I can't, verify how good the courses are, how good they're going to be for you. And frankly, a lot of times it depends on people's learning styles and those kind of things. So I won't be giving specific recommendations on those things, but from my experience doing this type of work, I will try to provide you with some strong tips and things that will really help get you prepared and started in this process. So let's move on. Okay, so what's going to be covered today? So we're going to be talking really about things that'll help you get a clear understanding of what the LSAT format looks like, because it has changed over the last couple of years. It changed because of COVID, one aspect that was already kind of changing before from a paper test to a digital test, but COVID caused some other changes to the test. And now even since COVID has kind of not gone away, but things have gotten better, a vaccine is out, and they've also just adjusted a little bit of how that test is going to be administered. So understanding that, when to take the test, how it's scored, fees, developing a timeline in a sense for registering for the test and actually taking the test. I did say I'm going to share with you some of the top 5 tips that I would recommend in preparation. We'll discuss some strategies for evaluating prep courses, because that's often the thing that we talk about is, well, I know there are test prep companies out there, there are resources, but what do I do? What am I looking for? What's a good one versus a bad one? So a little bit about how to kind of start evaluating courses. And then I'm going to introduce you to some prep resources to get you started in the process. Again, I'm not necessarily endorsing these particular courses or products that are there. I'm just giving you some resources for you to look to start exploring at whatever you're going to do for test prep. So I will give you these 2 important pieces with going into this test that I think are really critical. First is don't approach the test like you would study for an exam for one of your classes. Okay, does not test your knowledge on a particular subject matter area. Okay, with this test, you really want to be preparing and practicing for the exam. That's what you're doing. I'm taking practice tests, getting used to the questions, really starting to develop good strategies for how do you go about choosing the right answers or the correct answers on the questions, specifically on the multiple choice aspect of the test, which I'll discuss more. And the other piece is LSAT, that website, needs to become your best friend regarding all things law school, and really specifically with any questions you might have about the LSAT. So really get acquainted with this website. I use it, probably pretty frequently. I'm probably looking on there every day or every other day for some kind of information, doing the research, and I'm looking at different things that are changing, sometimes from month to month with the LSAT. But really, it is a great resource. So make sure you get used to using that, get really acquainted. It's so much information there that sometimes it can be overwhelming, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this webinar, to kind of synthesize and give you some specific things and simplify things a little bit for you. Okay, so LSAT format and structure. So the LSAT is broken up into two parts. And the first part is actually the multiple choice section, okay? With the LSAT, it is now online, it's live, it's happening remote. So at your home, at your office, wherever location you're at, and it's proctored. So there's literally gonna be somebody there watching you as you're taking your LSAT. So it's not like the traditional test. Maybe you've done it with the SAT or maybe some other standardized test where you're going to a testing center and taking it. The LSAT is not like that anymore. You'll be sitting at home like you are now, or wherever you're at in your dorm room, taking the test with someone watching you, okay? On the test, there are 3 scored and 1 unscored section of the test. So each section has a 35-minute time limit, okay? The 3 scored sections and versus the 1 unscored, you won't know what is what, okay? The unscored section is a way they actually test questions out for future LSATs. So don't necessarily stress about that, but just know you'll have 4 parts of that multiple choice. One of them is going to be unscored, and that can occur whenever. That can be after the second part of the multiple choice. It could be after the third. You won't know when that's going to be, but just know that that's there. The breakdown of what the test includes, though, and what they're looking at reading composition, which is a way of measuring your ability to read and understand examples of long form complex material. That's very similar to what you may encounter in law school. Okay. The analytical reasoning section, it measures your ability to understand structure of relationships and draw conclusions about that particular structure. And then the logic games, the dreaded logic games. Logical reasoning is what it's called. The nickname is always logic games is what they call it. I'd say the dreaded is because that's usually the most challenging part for most people taking the LSAT are the logic games. I hear that over and over and over again, okay? What this section does is assesses your ability to really analyze and critically evaluate and complete arguments, which is a lot of what you're gonna do as a lawyer. Critical thinking, logical reasoning, analytical thinking, those are gonna be a very important skill set. So that's what it's going to be, in a sense, testing or trying to see what your abilities are in those areas, okay? With this test, they do have a 10-minute intermission and a break period. I'm stating that specifically because that didn't used to be the case when we had the LSAT Flex, which was the version that they had basically during the height of COVID. So it was a little bit of a different test. You didn't get a break at all. Now with them adding back this 4th section in, they do give you a 10-minute intermission break. So during that time, you can use the restroom, eat, drink, take just a general break, whatever you need to do in that time period. However, you cannot use electronics. You cannot also talk about the test or the test questions to anyone. So there still are limitations around what you can do in that break period. You can see that the information in more depth on LSAT's website, but just know that you do get a little bit of a break period. So 10 minutes is not a lot of time, but it's better than nothing. It's really highly important, though, that you return to that test before or right at that time of that 10-minute mark in. So you're going to have a timer on your screen. You're going to be able to see that and know when the test is. And make sure you select the ready to check in button. That's going to be on there before the time goes off on your screen. Okay, this is critically important, and I'm making an emphasis to talk about this. I think I had maybe one student that didn't do that, and they actually had some issues with their test. So if the test taker, you all do not get back to that test and click that button, they will potentially not allow you to finish the test, and that session will be terminated. So you've done all this work to prepare for the test, study, get ready to be there, and then because you don't come back, you might not be able to have a test score. Your score might be basically in a sense canceled. You don't want that to happen. So just make sure you're being mindful of that, getting back on time. The second part of the test is actually a written essay. So this is called the LSAT writing. So this part of the test will be completed separately from your multiple choice exam. So don't feel the stress of also have to do multiple choice and then I have to do this whole writing essay prompt. Okay, you don't. You'll have a separate time that you'll be able to do that. That it also will occur online, and you also have to be in front of a proctor. So that's proctoring software that you're going to have to download on your computer to be able to do the writing portion. And this is an unscored section. So there is a 35-minute time limit with it, but you won't get a score from that. But law schools do like to see your reading, your writing skills. That's a big piece. I know in your applications, you have a personal statement, you have other optional essays. They're going to be able to attest to that, but they also want to assess it through the LSAC. So that is something that you absolutely want to complete as well. This can be taken as early as 8 days prior to the date of your multiple choice exam. Okay, so if you take that multiple choice, you have 8 days where you're before you're able to actually do the writing portion. So that's something that you will have to do. Really, really key point that I want to make with you all. If you don't do the essay, if you don't do the writing portion, when the scores are released, you won't get your score. Okay, if you're a first-time test taker, you've never done have a LSAT writing on file, those scores come out, you'll be one of the people who does not get their score, and that's really important. Also, your scores won't be released to your law schools. So if you don't do a writing and don't have that on file, they won't send out your score. So it's really, really important to do that. Okay. Just want to make one other point here because I know this is a question that probably might come up, and you will have time to ask questions at the end. I'm sorry I didn't mention that at the beginning, but we will have some time for you to ask questions. But I know this is a question that oftentimes that I have with students and candidates I'm meeting with. Is the prompts always the same? No, you will not all receive the same exact prompt that you're going to do. It's a randomly selected process that they'll send out. They have different versions of prompts on what you're going to write about. So depending on, if you've taken a test before, you won't get the same prompt that you've gotten before, and they do it in a random way. I'm checking the chat because I see maybe we have a question. One of our attendees asked, do you know if the format will stay the same forever or only in the short term due to COVID? That's a great question. I'm not sure yet. From everything of what LSAC has said and put out, things are not necessarily changing, at least until next June, June 2022. Nothing has been said after that point about if things are going to change. And they send out pretty much regular communication to candidates as well as me as a pre-law advisor. So if something is coming down the pipeline, they will give probably early enough notice to let people know that, hey, we're going to be changing how we're administering our tests. So one thing is good is to make sure you create an LSAC account. And then when they send out communications to candidates on people who have accounts, you want to be in that to get that. But I will also, if I am aware of something and I hear something about the change, I'll make sure our AU students and alumni that I've been working with will know that something is going to be changed. But as of right now, not sure. Great question. All right, let's keep it moving. So talking about the scoring of the tests. So Your LSAT score report. So this is a very important report. Not only are you going to see it, but your law schools are going to see it. What is included on this score report? So it's going to have your current score. So the LSAT is scored between, for the standard score, 120 to 180. So if you all are researching law schools, and I encourage you to do this in this process, and you're looking to see, well, what are the typical ranges of LSAT scores from their 25th percentile, median 50 percentile, and 75th percentile, which are the required percentiles that they must put out every year by the American Bar Association. What are those percentiles for those schools I'm interested in? It's usually going to be somewhere within that 120 to 80 range with the numbers. So that'll help you kind of see, oh, okay, if I'm looking at this school, this is, or these caliber of schools, maybe this is the goal area that I need to set myself for the LSAT. Okay, so you can find that information. Is readily available. The American Bar Association has a 509 disclosure reports website where this information is available. You also can probably find it on a lot of the law school websites as well. And I can always share with you resources and links to these things. I'm kind of doing double duty, doing the admin stuff and presenting, so I can't put the links in the chat right now, but I can share these with you if you all would like those. But yes, 120 to 180 is that score range. Next, you'll have results of all reportable tests. So up to the last 12, I think that's what LSAC says on their website. So including any kind of absences or cancellations for standard LSAT takers. So they'll be able to see those scores from previous tests. It also includes your percentile rank. This does reflect the percentage of test takers whose scores were lower than yours during the previous 3 testing years. Okay, percentile rank is reported of each of your scores. So just know that that's something else that will be on there. Then you also have a score band. Okay, the score band is what it says here. I put the words here because I'm reading a lot. It's a lot of text, but I want you to see this. It indicates the range of scores. So including scores that are maybe slightly higher or slightly lower than yours. And this is important because with the LSAT, it's not one, and I say 100% accurate, and they state this on their website too, it's not 100% accurate of exactly what you got. Okay, there's some kind of calculation that they do with it, but the test takers, it says actual proficiency may be slightly higher or slightly lower, so it falls kind of in that range. So the law schools will be able to see that too. For example, so if you were to score let's say a 157, well, what's going to also be reported is the score band, which could be anywhere between 154 and 160. Okay. So your score that you get, your standard score, still is what probably most of the law schools are going to be taking as they're looking at it. But just know that this information is also submitted with it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about score release, because that's always an important thing about, hey, well, when do the scores actually come out? How long is it going to take? And that does play a factor sometimes into, well, when am I going to retake my test? Okay, so score release dates will be posted on LSAC's websites for each test administration. And that's the screenshot that I have up on the screen here. Okay, so that's at the bottom of the page where you will be at to see the dates. So when you go to register for the test, you'll be able to look on the website, see all the test dates. On the bottom of that screen, it'll have the release dates. Now, if you're registering very far in advance, sometimes it'll say to be determined, because they haven't determined when those dates are going to come out. But as we get closer to the test date and you're registering, it'll definitely show what date it is. So if you see scores for people who took the test most recently, those scores came out actually today. So this was the October test. So typically the scores are coming out between 2 to 3 weeks after the test date. Okay, you will get a direct email to your email address that you have on file with your LSAT account saying that your scores are available to view, and you'll be able to go and log into your LSAT account and see what scores you have. Okay, the scores will also be released to the schools you have applied to at the same time. So if you are a student where you've already taken the test, you've already started to apply to schools, the scores are going to automatically go to them. So this, for your first-time test taker, your first time applying to law school, this may not be the case for you. Sometimes students retake the test, which people have to do to get a higher score if they need it. But just know they've taken the LSAT, they've applied, they retook it, even though they've already applied. So just know those scores are immediately going to be sent to those law schools. Okay, and so scores within the last 5 years will be eligible to use on law school applications. So just know that they will see any test that you've taken within the last 5-year period will show up on that report for you. Any questions on that from anyone? About score release? Okay, great. Okay, another feature that I wanted to point out to you all is score preview. Now, this right here is only available to first-time test takers. And what score preview does is allows you to actually, when the test scores come out, whatever date that is for your test administration, you're able to see your scores. Then you can cancel after you've seen the scores if you decide to do that. Okay. Again, it's only available for first-time test takers. This is a new thing that LSAT started probably about, I'm thinking about like a year ago, kind of around the same time they started the LSAT Flex and COVID, trying to give more flexibility to individuals first time taking the test. So you are able to see your test scores. Now it does have a cost. I have that listed there so you can see if you do it prior to the administration, prior to the first day of that testing. And I say the first day of testing because they usually have 3 days for test administrations. So you might be on the 3rd day. Well, you need to make sure that you already sign up and pay this before that first administration for that first test administration within that particular month. Okay, that's a really important piece. People have sometimes said, oh, I want to do this. And then they wait, oh, I didn't do it in time. So just know it needs to be before that first test, even if you aren't taking that first date of the test. You also have the option, if you don't do it before, you can pay a higher fee, $75, and then you can sign up after. And the specified, so they have a specified basic period, so you'll be able to see that. So it's different depending on the month and when you're taking it, but it's a specified period that they have that you can still, hey, you pay a higher fee, you can still get this score preview option. And canceling scores. So that is an option too. So there might be times where it'd be a number of reasons why somebody might decide to cancel the score. Could have felt terrible during the test and been sick. I've had a number of students that's happened to them before, and it's just they know they didn't do well on the test. It could be a number of reasons. You were distracted. There were things that interfered with your test, or you just weren't focused. So for whatever reason, you are able to cancel your score if need be. If you do cancel the score, law schools will see that you cancel. So it'll show up as a C on that report, the law school report that we were talking about, that LSAT score report that I was talking about earlier. So they will be able to see that, okay? They won't actually be able to actually see the score that you got. No one basically will see that. You won't see that either if you're not a first-time test taker and haven't gotten score preview. There are no refunds if you decide to cancel, as well as it can't be rescinded. So you really need to think seriously, do I want to cancel? Because you can't get a change of heart and right after you hit the button and say, oh, I'm submitting to cancel. Well, I actually want to use the score. LSAC will absolutely not rescind that. It is irrevocable and it will stay that way. And you'll have to take the test over again, okay? If you haven't gotten score preview, your scores can be canceled within 6 calendar days after your test date. Okay, so that's a really important aspect. No score preview, you have 6 calendar days after the test date, not after scores come back. If scores come back, you won't be able to cancel. So after the actual test date that you take it, you have 6 days. And if you have signed up for score preview and you meet all the requirements of the first-time test taker, you'll be able to get your scores on the release date, and then you'll have 6 calendar days after you have received the scores to then cancel. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility with being able to cancel. I will point this other piece out to you as well, because this was actually something new that I learned within the past year or so. But LSAC also has the right and the ability to cancel your scores for various reasons, okay? I highly, highly encourage you all to read over and understand their categories and reasonings for canceling scores. And I'll share with you all the website about where you can find that. That again, it's on LSAC's website, but that's a really important piece. There could be a situation with the proctoring where you violated one of the proctoring rules or regulations, and LSAT can deem that a violation and then cancel your scores. You don't want to be in that position. So it's really important that you know and make sure you're following all the procedures and rules that they have set for you. Check in the chat, see if we have any questions. So it says, if you do not purchase the preview option, are scores automatically sent to law schools? So in that case, basically, if you haven't applied yet, your scores aren't going to get sent. So regardless of the preview option. So if say, hey, I've taken the test, I haven't applied. When you apply though, your scores are going to get sent. Your scores will automatically then get sent off. They're basically going to just be in your file, and that's going to be on that report for you. So your scores will get sent off. Will schools see canceled score preview scores? No, no. At that point, no. If you have got the score preview option, you decided, hey, I don't want my scores to be utilized for my law school applications, and then you cancel, it will still show up as a C. It will still show up as a C on that report. The name of the website, it's LSAC, so it's the Law School Admissions Council. That's LSAC for short. I'm sorry, I keep saying it short. I'm just so used to saying it, but it's the Law School Admissions Council. That is the same place that you're actually going to go to register to take the LSAT. So you got to have an account. You're going to go to their website and you're going to be able to register for the test as well. Okay, I'm going to stop going on to questions. I'm going to keep going the presentation, but I will jump back to questions again, since these are all kind of flowing with each of the topics that we're covering. All right, there are some testing limitations, so I do want you all to be aware of that. Easiest way to remember this is the 3-5-7 rule. So 3 times in a single testing year. So you can only take the test 3 times within a single testing administration. So that would mean, for example, testing cycle could be for this particular cycle that we're in now. August 2021, it started, and that's going to go to June of 2022. Okay, so that would be the test administration cycle. That would be considered 1 year. Okay, so you only can take it 3 times within a single testing year. 5 times within the current and past 5 testing years. So basically within a 5-year period, you can't take it more than 5 times. They will limit you. And then 7 times within a lifetime. So you don't have an unlimited number of tests to take. So you do really want to be, I guess you would say, strategic and really mindful and thoughtful about, well, when am I going to take the test? Am I prepared to take the test? Because you do have some limitations on how many times you can take it. This didn't used to be the case. These kind of policies were set into effect, I think, in around September of 2019. So LSAC put some limitations on it. Okay. Now, if you've taken the LSAT Flex, I don't know if there's anybody who has already taken the LSAT before. Now they're coming back to it. But there were some administrations within the LSAT Flex that didn't count towards those time limits. I think it was the May, June, July, and August of 2020. Those test administrations, they didn't count towards the limits. So any test that's been taken from October 2020 and beyond, they will count towards those testing limits. Okay, so next, there are accommodations for individuals that have disabilities, and that's a really, really important piece, and I'm glad that LSAC really is making a point to, this information is on their website, they're really pushing this out there. If you need accommodations for this test, because it is online, it is remote, it's on a computer, you know, make sure that you take advantage and use those accommodations. Don't feel like, well, I don't want to use my accommodations, or haven't taken advantage of accommodations, or I really don't need them, but you actually do need them. Take advantage of your accommodations. Put in a request for accommodations. I really implore you all to do that if you do have accommodations. Now, these are accommodations they will provide for documented disability. So you have to have your paperwork, you have to have that stuff and be able to submit the required documentation that LSAC needs and request to make sure you're getting those accommodations that you need, okay? Accommodations can be requested online through your LSAC account. But if assistance is needed, you always have the option to be able to call or send them emails. You have to be registered for a test to make the online request for accommodations though. Okay, so that's an important piece. You can't say, well, I want accommodations and then go register for the test 3 months later. No, you have to go ahead and already register for that test that you're going to take and then go in and submit your accommodation request and documentation for that test administration that you're going to take. Highly, highly encourage you to make sure that you're doing this in advance. So for example, you register for your test 2 months in advance, go ahead and also put in those requests for accommodations. Sometimes I don't know if it takes a time to get processed. I don't know how many people are already requesting accommodations. So don't wait until the last minute to try to do this a couple of days before the test. I think they also may even have limitations on when you can submit accommodations. So make sure that you're doing this stuff well in advance if you're actually taking the LSAT. Let's see. I'm gonna jump back to some questions and see if we have anything related to. Does apply mean a completed law school application? What if you're in the process of applying? Does your score still get sent to the law schools you're applying to? So apply means that you have actually went to LSAC, went into the CAS service, Credential Assembly Services, gone through, selected your school, went through their whole application online through that portal, and actually have now submitted your applications to the school. So if you're in the process, like, hey, I went in, I started working on the application, but I haven't actually finished and submitted, then the scores won't be sent off at that point, okay? The scores get sent off when you actually have officially sent and applied to the law schools, okay? To answer that question for you. Any questions about disability accommodations? There's a lot more information. I'm not going in depth on this because of this time, and we only have really an hour, 45 minutes to an hour to talk about these things, but I just want to make you all aware of this. Make sure you're going on LSAT's website, reading through, because they have different categories of who needs to submit documentation, what types of accommodations that they can provide as far as extended time, et cetera. So just make sure you're making yourself fully aware of what kind of options that you have within this test or accommodations. Okay, talking about some fun stuff now. Timeline, registering, costs. So the biggest question is I get all the time, it's like, well, when should I take the test? Well, it really does depend. And I have all this information on the slide because I want you all to be able to read it and see it, but it really does depend on you. There are so many factors that could potentially affect when you decide to take the test. And all these ones I'm hitting here are things that have actually happened to students and candidates that I've worked with before. You may be planning to take a gap or a bridge period between, when you finish undergrad or master's program and go to law school. Well, that may kind of affect when you decide to take the test, because you may not need to do it right when you're still an undergraduate student, when you're also studying for your exams, you're taking classes, you're doing internships, you're volunteering, you're working on campus. It may not be the best time to do it because you don't have the time to prepare, okay? The availability of time and resources for prep. Maybe you need to save up some money first before you purchase that prep class that costs $1,500. That might impact your time of being able to take the test. Maybe you're going to study abroad. Might also not be the best time if you're doing a study abroad experience to be studying also for the LSAT or having to take the LSAT while you're abroad. Might not be the best time. So you really do want to think about what factors kind of matter to you and what's going on in your life at the time, because that can influence when you decide to actually take the test. And I'll share with you my general advice. So if you are a current student, and let's say you're a junior, I think you should plan to take the test at least either in the spring semester of junior year or June or August of that summer between junior year and senior year. Part of the reason for that is you want to give yourself enough time to actually retake the test if you need to retake the test, which it's very common. Most people take the test at least a minimum of 2 times. With law school, they do rolling admission. So you're essentially applying almost a year before you would start going to actual law school and get admitted to go. So, for example, most law schools open their application periods between September 1st and September 15th. Okay, so with that, ideally, it's good to try to get your applications in early because of rolling admission. October, November, December is ideal timeline of when you're trying to get your applications in. So you, again, want to take that test early enough so that you can take it again, get your scores back, and then also complete the rest of the components of the application. Okay, you're potentially going to be studying anywhere between 4 to 6 months, roughly. Again, give or take. Some people don't need as much time. Some people need less time. Anywhere between 10 to 15 hours a week, especially the week beforehand, or more. So it really can vary per who you are, but you know you need to put in significant time on studying and preparing for this test. Okay. It's highly important that you register for the test well in advance. This can be done online through your LSAT account. I would recommend registering at least 2 months before the test, at least. Most of the registration deadlines range from anywhere between a month to about a month and a half in advance of the test. I think the February test, for example, the registration deadline for the February test that's upcoming is December 29th. And the one for January, I think, is sometime earlier in December. So you want to make sure you're registering enough in advance for these tests. The test has worldwide administration, so you can actually take the test, in other countries other than the United States. And depending on which region you are in, the test dates may be different. So that's a really important piece, and you need to make sure that you're looking on LSAT websites to see when those dates are for the test. So for test administrations in US, including Puerto Rico and US Virgin Islands, and Canada, most of the tests are going to be January, February, March, April, June, August, October, and November. This is what the current months look like for the test. LSAT can decide to change things. Right now, only dates they have put out are up until June of 2022. So they can decide they want to add back in a July test next year. They can take away the October, November, and go back to having a September test. They can do that. They haven't, told us what they're going to be, and they haven't released those dates yet. So right now, these are the months that the test is going to be administered going forward right now. All the other regions, so the rest of the world, in a sense, as of today, October, January, April, and June are the months that the test is going to be administered. The LSAT costs $200, and that does include the writing portion. Okay, now I didn't put this up here, but there are fee waivers for people who have significant financial need. So there is documentation that you have to present to LSAT. I believe it's tax documentation, et cetera. And you have to do that fairly in advance too, to see if you're going to get a waiver, in a sense, for the cost of the LSAT. So that is something to look into. If you do have a significant financial need, and you can prove that and show that to LSAT, that is something that you also want to make. That's the same kind of thing with the accommodations. Make sure you're submitting that information in advance to be able to get that. In the test date change and withdrawal, I want to draw your attention to this too, because there are fees associated with that. So sometimes people decide, I need to change my test date, or I don't want to take the test at all because something has come up. But there are fees. There are fees if you change it, and they significantly do reduce the amount of a refund that you may be able to get. So it's really important to look at that. You need to know when these dates are. There's a list on LSAT's website. Put that information down. Not only put in when the test dates are that I'm taking, but also in the event that I need to change something, I want to know what these dates are so I can do it in advance. I've had work with students before who they decided I want to change my date. go and look at changing the date, well, they would have to pay basically for a whole nother LSAC, another $200 because they're past the dates and deadlines on being able to get the date changed or get a complete refund for the test. Okay. Let me jump to some questions again here. Does that actually does that happen automatically? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Summer. This may be, but how do you anticipate how COVID-19 will show a reflection in the scores of law school admissions? Offices will judge scores for upcoming cycles compared to the past 1 to 2 cycles, as well as in the thick of the pandemic? That's a great question. I'm not necessarily sure on that right now. There's a lot of data that LSAC puts out in regards to that, and they do look at that. Overall, honestly, I think the scores through LSAC Flex were higher overall from I've been assigned on a couple of webinars. They were higher. I don't know necessarily why that is, and because it was a remote proctor test, because people were doing it at home, I'm not exactly sure. This is stuff that LSAC looks at and process and evaluate. And they have a whole team that does the data analyzation of the tests. Overall, I don't think that, from what I've heard from some admissions folks, it's not necessarily going to change their standards and ranges for their schools. Like, they're not upping their ranges so much higher because they got a year of so much, I guess you would say, so many students with higher LSAT scores. You know, some schools do change a point or two up or down, depending on their own goals and what they have set. But I don't think what has happened over, the last year with LSAT Flex and the pandemic is going to drastically adjust and make changes to those numbers. I know LSAC has done some tweaks to the test in a sense, but I don't think it's going to overwhelmingly adjust how law school admissions are judging candidates. That answers that question. Okay. Let me keep going because I want to get through all my slides here, and I know we have limited time, and I want to keep answering the questions as we go through. It's important to make sure that you're checking your equipment, okay? Because this is an online test, it's proctored, it's digital, you need to make sure you have the proper equipment for this test, okay? So your computer, Windows, Mac, make sure you have the proper operating system. Again, that's listed on LSAC's website to tell you the specific numbers and Safari and whatever types of things you're supposed to have there. Adequate webcam, microphone, you're gonna need that. A strong, stable internet connection is very important. You do not want your internet to be able to go out in the middle of this test. It is internet-based. Chrome and Firefox are the preferred web browsers that LSAC has stated that they want students to use, and it's going to be appropriate for the proctoring system there. Ability to download the proctoring software. So you want to make sure you have admin rights on your computer so you can download stuff and it won't block you. And I know people have firewalls and those kind of things set. So make sure you're able to download the software. LSAC does have an assistance kind of program for people who have needs. They don't have the proper equipment. They don't have computer. They don't have stable internet connection, or maybe you don't really, in your home, wherever you're at, have really a quiet place and a location to be able to take this test. That's really important. LSAC does have an assistance request program. They have a deadline that you have to have to meet to request this. But if that's the case and you have a need, make sure you're going through that process and requesting any of the equipment. They have loaner computers and I think other loaner equipment as far as cameras and microphones that they can provide you. Put in a request early for those kind of things. Make sure you're meeting the deadline. So if you need those assistance, make sure you're taking advantage of it. Okay, so top 5 prep tips. And this is actually something I adapted from University of Michigan's College of Law. I did a lot of searching and trying to find tips, and all these tips that they had really coordinated with some of the things that I tell people already. So I got some of the language off of their site too, but these were really the things I think are the most helpful tips for anybody that's taking the LSAT. Okay, start the process early. And I don't just mean studying early. I mean, start the process of determining which test administration that you plan to take. because that will potentially impact your timeline and when you're going to be preparing and moving forward. So make sure that you're doing your due diligence there, okay? Make sure you have enough time to retake the test. I mentioned that before. If your score does not meet your goal range, if you're just not happy with the score, or if you just want to give it another attempt and feel like you can get a higher score. So give yourself the time and ability to do that. So start this process early. Don't procrastinate. I've heard so many times people say, well, I plan to study this time and then it doesn't happen. You're impacting yourself. And that score really is important, not only for admission, but also merit-based aid. Next, explore your prep options and select one or more options for what you're going to use to study. So there are a number of different options for prep, okay? You should consider really your learning style, your budget for prep, what motivates you, and I highly recommend that you start with LSAT's prep tools. Many of them are free to use. That's a good resource to do, okay? Some options for prep. You have commercial prep courses. There are a ton of those. There are so many, I couldn't even list all of them for you. There are so many organizations that do commercial prep. So look at courses like that. You can do one-on-one tutoring. Some of the even prep courses will have options where, or prep companies will have options where it's not necessarily a course that you're taking with other people, but you have an option to do one-on-one tutoring with their instructors. There are prep books that you can get online. Some of them are more expensive, some of them are least expensive, a little bit less expensive. There are various free online resources that help prepare people for the LSAT, as well as you can approach a self-study method, which that could be a combination of getting books, free online resources, and other things that are there. So develop a study plan. That's my next tip. Get the study plan, use the resources, and commit to it. That is really, really vital. I think overall, regardless of what you use as far as the prep resources, that's up to you, but commit to this study plan and stay on it. It needs to be a prioritized, rigorous study. That's going to be necessary for you to get the possible highest LSAT score you can get. Okay. I think it's generally law school applicants study in between anywhere from 10 to 14 weeks or more for the LSAT. And it can vary. I always recommend treating the LSAT like it's a 4-credit foreign language course that you've never been introduced to the language before. Put that in your mindset, like, okay, this is going to be something that's quite challenging potentially, but the preparation that you do is going to get you to the point where you need to be at. So just treat it like another course, prioritize it in that way. Whatever way you use to organize yourself, put it on your calendar, develop that study schedule, and then really stick to that plan that you have going forward to make sure that you're doing the best you can. I know sometimes things come up, but if you prioritize it, you set yourself reminders, you put it on the schedule, I think you'll be able to stick to that much better. Get logical. As I mentioned before, the logic games aspect of the test, the logical reasoning questions, are typically said to be the most challenging. Okay, so you really want to focus on getting comfortable with those types of questions and practicing those questions as much as you can. And then lastly, extensive practice. Okay, make sure that you're taking practice tests. Okay, you should take your first practice test. Often it's called a diagnostic. If you're doing these courses, you're usually going to do some kind of diagnostics, and that's going to tell you kind of where you're at baseline. So as you're going through the process, you're taking the course, you're going through your tutoring, how you're progressing, and if you're improving, or maybe you're not improving, or maybe what area do you need to focus on as far as where you're putting more of your study efforts to get a higher score. Because there could be, well, I'm doing really good on this section, but I know I'm lacking here in this particular area. So you can shift and adjust your focus so that you can study adequately there. Okay. And when you do the practice test, take it in the same kind of environment and conditions that you would the actual LSAT. I'm a big sports fan. I used to play football, basketball. So I always think about I want to practice like I'm going to play. So I'm going to put myself in that same environment that I'm going to be in for the actual kind of game or the actual test. So just make sure you're doing those things. Let's go over a few prep resources. First, this is often a question I get, so I wanted to spend a little time on it, is how you evaluate courses, okay? Because there are a lot that are out there. There are many options. So what separates one from another? It's really an important thing to look at. So 4 ways that I would tell you to look at to evaluate your courses. First, look at the cost. Realistically, the courses are very expensive. You need to know where your budget is, how much money you have to invest in this, and it is an investment. I look at LSAT prep as an investment in yourself and in your future, because that can impact schools that you get into and the merit-based award that they decide to offer you. So really look at the cost. Does this fit your budget? Does this fit a comfortable amount that you're willing to pay and being able to take this actual course? And are you getting, adequate amount of instruction in a sense for your money that you're putting in? It's an investment. The content within the course. So make sure you're picking a course that is actually using real LSAT questions, okay? You will find these primarily with prep companies that are using licensed LSAT material. And there's a list, and I'll share with you where that list is going to be found at. But you want to potentially look at, you don't want to take a course that has basically made up or fake questions that haven't actually been on past LSAT tests. So really make sure you're looking at that. And there are a number of different past tests there available. They're out there. You can find those online and be able to see actual real LSAT questions. Instructors, you want to ask yourself some questions with the courses. Ask them directly to this as the information is not provided, or at least as you're looking at the test prep courses online, answering these particular things. Have the instructors actually taken the official LSAT before? There may be companies out there that are hiring people who actually haven't really taken the test. You want people who have really taken the test before, because they're going to know what you're going into and what the test actually looks like. How have these instructors done on the test themselves? Were they scoring in high percentiles? Were they scoring in the 99th percentile? Were they scoring in the 75th percentile? I would maybe want to know that information as much as I can to know that I'm getting an instructor who actually did well on the test themselves. And also maybe another way to look at it is if you have some people naturally just have great abilities and can just do well on tests, but then you also have people who maybe have had to work at it, and maybe they didn't get the highest thing in their first test, but they worked at it, they learned, they studied, they developed adequate strategies, and were able to increase those scores. Sometimes those might be really, really effective instructors because they're coming from a place where they've had a low score, they know how to work to gain a higher score. So think about it like that too, as you're looking at instructors. Look at how much experience do they have with prepping candidates. Are they a rookie? Are they new to this? Or have they had 5, 10, 15 years or more of actual instructing time and they've been working with students before? So what's their track record? Look at that. How successful have their candidates been on the test themselves? So do some evaluations of the instructor as well to see, ask those kind of questions before you just sign on. Most of these test preps, you can go online, you can sign up, pay your money online. I say take an extra step. It might help to call their office, call their customer service, call their product sales teams or whatever they're calling them, and ask them some questions about their actual products and their courses that they're putting out there in the instructors. Assess the materials and support that you're going to get. Okay, so with these tests, what kind of packages are they offering? Do they have diagnostics? Are they doing diagnostic tests? How many practice tests am I getting with it? Do they have lectures? Are there homework, drills, instructional videos? So think about all these different things. What are you getting in that package, and how long do you have access to it? Some courses have a limited window where, hey, only for this 3-week or 4-week period that you're actually enrolled in the course taking it is when you have access to this material. Some have it where you have the access to the course, and then probably 2 or 3 more weeks or however long it goes up to the next test administration or your test date. So you want to see, how much access do I have? Is it online? Is it in person? Is it a hybrid course? So you want to think about the access and the materials that you're going to get. And then how much support does the course provide you and when can you receive it? You know, do they have a 24-hour chat line that you can send chat messages into? I don't know. I'm making up that, but see what they may have available and how I can access it. Because if my instructor is never accessible, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to me. So look at those kind of things. How accessible are the resources, instructors, et cetera. So really delve down and kind of do some evaluations of the courses. And then lastly, this is kind of a select list of some resources. I am by no means endorsing any of these particular courses or books or products. I'm just sharing this information for you, so you to kind of get a sense of what options are out there for you. So there are companies. There's a whole list on LSAT's website that has licensed products that they're using. LSAT Hub, that's actually LSAT's test prep, official test prep that they're offering. They have a free version. Then they also have an LSAT Prep Plus version. It costs $100, well, $99, basically $100. And it gets a little bit more than what the free prep offers you. AU has an LSAT prep course that's offered throughout the year that you can register for. And that usually is an evening-based class that you would be signing up for and taking. There's also Khan Academy LSAT prep that is completely free LSAT prep. Now, I will tell you that I have heard some negative reviews on that recently from a few people, because some of the instruction that they give hasn't adapted to the complete remote proctored model. I don't know if Khan Academy is working to change that, but I have heard that from a few people who have looked at it. Now, it is a free resource. I would say use it at least to get an introduction to questions is what I would really be looking at. So not necessarily strategy all the time, but having, you know, introduction to what are some of the types of questions that are going to be asked. So I can kind of get a sense of, okay, how I need to be prepared, how I need to be studying. A new resource that I actually discovered is actually through the AU. They have, I guess, purchased this through Memotrex's eLibrary. So you do have to be in your AU account and log in officially, but they have all these different things that they provide. So that's already a free resource to you as an AU student, that the library has already purchased the resources to that. So look at that. And then lastly, for anybody who's really seriously thinking about self-study, LSAT Trainer by Mike Kim. It's a book, it's a course, they have a website too. I've heard positive reviews about that from people who decided to do self-study. So that's another one that I would at least say, hey, look at, that's an option, and consider if that would be one of the ways that you want to prepare for the LSAT. Okay. So with that, let's see what questions I have here. And I know we're probably at time. If people want to stay longer and ask questions, please feel free. I'm not going to cut it off. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can. I'm going to give us, you know, a few more minutes past because we did start a little behind. So let me go back here. And responding to Summer's question about does it actually happen, meaning sending the scores after you apply if you take the test before beginning an application. Meaning sending the scores after you apply if you take the test before beginning the administration. So Summer, I think I'm understanding your question, right? So there can be times where I've had students that say they've applied in, they've taken an August or November LSAT or something like that, and they applied in December. Then they just said, well, I haven't got decisions back yet from schools, and I wanted to retake the test. And they retook it in January and got a higher score. With that, a situation like that, if the student know they're going to do that, I would tell them to, hey, contact the schools and ask them to see if they can hold off on reviewing your application because you're going to retake the LSAT. So it doesn't happen all the time, but that sometimes is a route that we try to go. And I've had students do that before. They've gotten higher on that next test that they took, and then those scores were, again, immediately sent when they came to the law schools, and then the law schools did a review based off of that higher LSAT score. Now, they're going to get all the scores, so some schools may look at do an average of the score. Some schools take the higher score. I think most schools are probably taking the higher score, but it's not a certainty. Some schools have another way of how they do evaluation. But that can sometimes happen. And that's been a strategy sometimes on an approach. If you wanted to get the application out, but knew you were going to retake that test again. Now you also have the other factor where you can just hold off on applying to after you've taken that test again and then apply. So that's two different kind of, I guess, strategies with it. But yes, that does happen. Going to jump from the chat to, I know there are a few questions in the Q&A. How much time do you recommend for studying for the test? Would 3 months be enough? Potentially, yes. 3 months potentially could be enough. Again, I give that range of 4 to 6 months of studying potentially, but depends on your learning style, depends on how you prepare for the test. So you may not need to have that full time. So that really is, it really can vary basis who you are and your study strategy. Let's keep going. When should you create an LSAC account? Should you create the account early in your college years or when you are close to taking the exam? Excellent question. I don't think you necessarily need to create it if you're like a freshman or a sophomore. I think that may be a bit early. You don't need to do it. You absolutely can. It's nothing that's going to stop you from creating an account and having that there. So feel free to do it there. But ideally, I would say, if you're seriously thinking about law school and considering it, I would probably do it in your junior year or that summer right before junior year starts. That's when I would say, okay, fine, go ahead and create an account, start looking at stuff, start planning. That would be the ideal timeline. So I am a freshman and I was wondering when I should create an LSAC account. Should I create it closer to when? Oh, okay. I just answered that question for you already. I have a copy of a 2019 Kaplan LSAT practice test book. Are materials from previous year's LSAT exams appropriate to study for the new one? I don't think it hurts. Now, they can change the test questions up, and they probably have a method of how they change the test questions. Now, 2019, I mean, it's fine to look at that for questions. I don't see an issue with that because a lot of times when you're looking at past practice tests that are out there too, they're going to be from previous administrations, and that's not too far off. Now, if you said you had something from a 2000 test, I might say maybe let's look at getting something that's a little bit newer, but I think 2019 is not too old of a test book. Sometimes with the test new versions that they may put out, it may not be drastic changes that they're going from one version of a book to another. I don't know if any of you experienced that from classes that you've taken, and sometimes it might be, hey, they got this edition in this semester, and then it might be a completely new one in the next session, but it might be very small, minuscule tweaks. But yeah, I think that would be okay. I don't see an issue from using the older version. Okay. Do you recommend anything for international students, like study more vocabularies? Now that's getting into kind of like technical areas, which I kind of don't cover. I honestly would recommend that you utilize whatever the kind of test prep resources you're going to do. It's just, again, outside of my area, when you start getting into strategy and questions and what things you can do to prepare, that's not an area that I really get into cover. So sorry, I can't answer that effectively for you. Okay, so that's the question section. Let me look back at the chat because I know there are a bunch of questions in the chat as well. When would the best time be to take it if you study abroad? Spring junior year and don't/can't study LSAT while abroad. Well, that would be, so in that case, you have to kind of make a decision, one on, it always goes back to when you're planning to apply, if you're wanting to go straight through, because that does kind of jump in and kind of impact your timeline a little bit. Now with that, you have two options, I would say. Look at either preparing earlier to take it, so meaning you may be taking it in the fall of your junior year. If you know spring semester, I'm going abroad, I have that plan, I've done everything I need to do to go abroad and that's going to happen, you might want to take it before you go abroad, or make that decision to maybe take it when you're coming back. So depending on if you're going just abroad for the spring semester, you will be back, I'm guessing maybe May or June. You might then want to probably look at, hey, maybe I'm taking the August administration. So after I get back, I'm basically using the summer months to do my prep. Now that's going to cut into your time a bit, but that could be the option. And that potentially would be that August test right before senior year, fall semester, senior year starts. If you wanted to push it out even more and study more, you do have probably the October and November tests. So October would be ideal then if you need extra time. Again, you're pushing it there because you're getting closer to the time where I would recommend you actually get your applications in to law schools. Is there a benefit of taking the test earlier, like sophomore year? Not necessarily. I don't think there's a benefit outside of getting the kind of monkey off your back and saying, oh, it's done, I got my test scores, it's in. The only way one thing that could potentially be a negative aspect on that, say it's kind of early to be making a firm decision that you're going to go to law school in your sophomore year. Okay. It can happen. That can fine if you know you want to go on that track. I wouldn't stop anybody from taking it that early necessarily, but sophomore year is a bit early. It just is a bit early. Now, if you are a situation where you're in a 3-year program, it makes a little bit of a difference. I know we have some PPL students or students that may be in other programs where they have, only 3 years or so. That's an option that you may have to take it early in that case. But overall, I don't think there's necessarily a huge benefit outside of having it done. The other kind of con there could be score's good for 5 years. What if you decide that you don't want to go straight through and then you want to work? That cuts into your 5-year window of how long you have. So maybe saying, well, I wanted to work for 3 years outside of my undergrad degree. Well, if you're already taking a sophomore year, that's potentially cutting into that time period that you can work outside before you would need to, again, retake the test again, because that 5-year window is what's going to be eligible to submit to law schools for admission. What time do we got here? I'm gonna go to 7:15, so I'll get a couple more questions here. Is it helpful to start one-on-one tutoring after having some knowledge of the LSAT, or better to have not much knowledge, so no bad habits? That's a bit of a personal decision, I think. I don't see one way is better than the other, because you can definitely have knowledge and be looking at the questions and have an understanding of that, and then go about, developing a strategy one-on-one with the tutor that you have. Again, that's getting into strategy a little bit more, which I don't kind of go into, but I don't see an issue with having some, overall understanding of the test questions, what it looks like, before deciding to go with a one-on-one tutor. So it's kind of up to you and what you feel comfortable with. Okay. Going back to some of the questions, if you take the LSAT before you begin the application / submit the application, when do you submit the application? Do the scores get sent automatically then? How does this work? So you're taking the LSAT for the most part before you're even applying, okay? So you're not gonna apply and then take the LSAT. You're gonna take the LSAT before you apply so that those scores are in the system, those scores show up in your report, because that's part of the evaluation process that you need to look at with the schools, because, and this is going more in depth than just LSAT, but you're trying to research schools and actually apply to schools that you have potentially a high probability of getting accepted to based upon the data, based upon your LSAT scores and GPA. So as you're researching schools, you want to look at their numbers to see, well, one, that's going to give me a gauge of where I need to be with LSAT scores and my likelihood of getting accepted. But two, also, what schools am I interested in? How do I need to prepare for the test? So you need to kind of look at those things first. So you're going to be taking the LSAT and getting your scores back before you apply. And then when you go to apply and you submit the application, everything in your file, so all the things, your LSAT scores, your transcripts, your recommendation letters, personal statement, any other additional documents that come with that application that the school is requiring you to submit, is then all going to get submitted to the law school. The portal and the place that you're going to do your applications at for any of the ABA approved law schools, which is absolutely what you want to apply for, is going to be on LSAC's website through a service called the Credential Assembly Services. So that wasn't kind of the topic of this session. We talked about that in the previous session, but definitely you can meet with me and we can have more of a one-on-one where I can go through the process with you in a little bit more detail. But you're going to submit everything online there. Got a response that any published LSAT questions is good prep within 5 years or so. So this was great. Okay, good. I think I've gotten through all the questions. And so we have a few people still here. I think we're at time. Okay, well, great. This was excellent. I appreciate the participation and everybody being here. Again, forgive me for not being able to put a lot of the links into the chat. FYI, I am available and a resource to help if you are an SPA student or an alumni or even an SIS student. I do one-on-one advising. My schedule is extremely busy right now because this is prime application season. So if you aren't a senior and you're actually going through, or an alumni and you're going through the application process now, I would recommend that you wait probably until the spring to really book with me. Just because my schedule is so swamped right now with pre-law advising and the other advising that I do. If you're an SPA student, Michelle Engert, who is my counterpart, Professor Michelle Engert, who is a lawyer and a professor in JLC, does advising and helps students on a one-on-one basis. So if you're an SPA student, you can definitely reach out to Professor Michelle Engert in JLC. There's a pre-law website that's out there that's available for you. I'm doing some revamping of that, so I wouldn't recommend that as the first place to go to. And I've actually gotten access to now have a Canvas course that's going to be for pre-law students. I'm going to have a ton of resources. I'm going to be able to push out announcements to you all. I'm still working on doing some tweaking to that. But for anybody who was on this session here, I'm going to, if you're a current student, not alumni, sorry alumni, but if you're a current student, I'm going to be adding you into that so that you now have access to those resources. Okay. Again, thank you for your participation. I really appreciate it. Hope all of you have a wonderful evening and take care.